Hi, this is Mr. C, and we're going to do a quick introduction to mat cutting frames today. Mat cutting frames is an important part for every artist entering shows and competitions. You need to know how to use a mat frame cutter and produce the inside beveled edge that is commonly required to display fine art. All right, so this machine in front of me today is a mat cutter. I'm going to drop it down here. And this bar, this press bar, helps seal it together so that as you're cutting, the paper doesn't warp or wiggle. I'm going to adjust the picture that we're going to be framing today, and I'm going to weight it a little bit heavier on the bottom. I'm going to go 1.5 inches on the bottom, 1 inch in from the sides. The ruler I'm using, by the way, is a clear grid ruler. Very, very helpful. Okay, and we have about a 1 inch all the way around the sides. Need to go a smidge up. I'm going to press this mat board very carefully against this inner edge. If I don't do that, I'll end up with a crooked cut, and mat is very expensive. You do not want to be miscutting mat in any way. Okay. And I'm going to use a beveled slide today. It's on ball bearings, and it has a blade inside of it that if we loosen this all the way up, we can pop out. You see that the blade is here, and if it's not sharp enough, it can be reversed, and new blades can be inserted here. Okay. And when I put that blade back in, I have to adjust it so that it cuts through the mat, but it doesn't actually touch. It doesn't actually touch the metal trough. You don't want to dull your blade prematurely or having kind of a miscut or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and drop it down and just a smooth pull through. Okay. That's going to cut off what I need. Normally I would use the back straight edge, but for speed's sake, I like to sometimes just keep that there and then cut the inside bevel. Now, when I cut the bevel, I actually have to flip the paper over. I have to flip the mat board over, and I have to line up everything all over again. So, again, using this grid ruler, I can easily find my corners at 1 inch and 1 inch there. Okay, and then come down below, measure out 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches. It's pretty tedious work, but once I have the corners, I go ahead and I mark them. Now these corners, I cannot cut this yet. I have to come in. The bevel needs to be smaller than the diameter of the paper. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to come back in. I'm going to make sure to come in a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch. Actually, I'm going to change that to a 1/4 inch. We want this to be tight and show most of the work. So I'll bring it in just a 1/4 inch for all we need. All right, typically I'll cross those just to make sure I don't mistake them for my other bevel, my original points, especially if you do any kind of correction. All right, so I'm going to drop this down, and I'm going to cut the bevel, but I'm going to make sure to line it up even with these lines that are typically on mat cutters, because I might have been a little bit off. And that happens. There's a lot of user error in this. So what I want to do is I want to line it up just on on those groove lines provided, those channel lines, that's why they're there. And I'm gonna start cutting just a little beyond the cross, and I'm gonna feather it in. And I'm gonna want that blade to just sort of go in right as I touch down there. And bring this all the way over, and then I'm gonna go halfway across that. I'm gonna overcut just a tiny bit, just a tiny bit. Okay, and I'll work my way around, doing just that. Again, using the lines that are on the mat cutter to make sure I'm getting an even cut. It's very important also that your mat is square when you start out with. You know, just using a typical cutting board and whatnot is sufficient, but you really gotta double check and make sure that your mat is square, because if I'm lining these lines up with this edge, but the mat board itself is not square, that's a problem. And I'll end up cutting a square on the inside that is crooked. Okay, the last cut looks nice and even. Okay, now in this case, I had it fall out pretty perfectly, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes the corners are hung up. You maybe didn't cut close enough. Have an X-Acto knife close by, and all you have to do is just cut off the extra little tag. Don't try to rip it off. If a corner is stuck on this and you just pull it up real quick, it'll rip a hole. The paper will come up on that mat corner and it'll look very unprofessional, and you don't want that. So next step to this, now I left a heavier weight down at the bottom, 1.5 inches versus 1 inch all the way around the sides. And I did that because as a personal preference, you can go even all the way around. A lot of people do, that's just fine. But in art, a lot of times people will choose to leave a heavier weight down on the bottom, and we'll see what that looks like in just a moment. I'm going to line this red blue drawing by Sam Spencer up here. And I'm just going to use some typical clear tape, Scotch tape on the corners. I usually like to go in the middles as well, just a little bit. Notice I'm not taping it too far onto the page, so that if it does tear, it tears just the edge of the work and not too deep into it. So I'm going to flip this over, and here we have this person on a bicycle looking quizzically back behind them with a flat tire, framed up. I think Sam could probably come in here and do a little something right there, but beautiful red-blue drawing, and with a frame, matte frame, that is a little heavier on the bottom end, ready for display. So if you're doing any kind of work that is flat, and canvases, of course, require a different set of skills that we'll talk about at a later time, but if you're doing any kind of flat work, it's very important that you prepare your work to be displayed in the most professional manner possible. So get used to mat cutting, and I expect that when I ask you to mat cut, you're able to do it. So this is the Universal Art Assessment label on the back. Cut off the grading tag, put on there so that this work doesn't ever get lost. All right, thank you much. Get going.